Hello folks, how you guys doing? My name is Mark, this is Why I Hate the World, my peoples, where you at? So I want to talk a little bit about men. In particular, these sort of manosphere creators which have started to focus more on politics. See, the thing with the manosphere is that it's kind of a reaction to the left wing not paying very close attention to men's issues. The left wing is very focused on things like trans rights, gay rights, women's issues, that kind of thing like that. But when it comes to just ordinary cis males who are like disaffected by society or whatever, it doesn't really seem like the left has much to say to them. Not really. In reaction to this sort of this identity politics, you're starting to see these manosphere types start to move into actual politics. So before, whereas if you would take a typical manosphere creator, somebody like Andrew Tate or Mike Cernovich or something like that, typically they would just be talking about, getting laid or whatever, and then there'd be lots of misogyny in there, that kind of thing. And over the last couple of years, they've expanded that in order to include conservative politics. So we're starting to see the results of that. Men, for example, in this last election voted overwhelmingly in support of Donald Trump, especially men in younger age groups, which is kind of disturbing. And so now we see this divide, this sort of sexual gender divide in politics where women are more likely to be liberal and progressive and men are more likely to be conservative. And it's really because of the manosphere types that have basically indoctrinated these young guys who don't know any better. And we, as people on the left, which I like to consider myself a part of, we should really start addressing this. We should start talking to young men and showing what we have to offer to them. So anyway, in that regard, I found this video, which is by a guy his name is Wisdom Warriors. This video is called "The Problem with Society is Most Men Don't Own Anything, so they don't give a fuck." That's the name of this video. I mean, I guess it's exactly what it says on the tin. Maybe you could have, worded that better or something, but whatever. So we're going to go ahead and watch here, and I chose this guy because this video kind of hit me because it's not just about not getting laid, which is usually what these manospheres, sort of like men's rights activist dudes, focus on. In this video, he talks about politics in general and why democracy is bad for men. But I don't know. Let's let the man say it in his own words.
Okay, team. Today, I want to talk about why men are going their own way. Why a lot of men are abandoning their families or abandoning trying to date or relationships. Why community is failing and patriotism or shared social bonds are getting destroyed. It comes down to ownership. Now,
so that term, men going their own way, by the way, it's a pretty well-known term in manosphere circles. Basically, it's called MGTOW. What it means is that it's a man that supposedly doesn't conform to society's norms or whatever. Like the idea that you have to get married and you have to have children and you have to do all this other shit, which is absolutely fine. If you don't want to get married, if you don't want to settle down and have the house and the car and the 2.5 kids and the white picket fence, that is 100% your prerogative. I don't see why it's such a big fucking deal that you have to start a movement out over it. But it's been my experience with these MGTOW types that it's a way for men to complain about how women don't want to bend over backwards to fuck them and serve them anymore, and won't allow them to basically treat them like they're maids and shit like that. And it's basically just men complaining that they can't find a girlfriend because they're a bunch of misogynist assholes. Let's let the man continue.
I might be canceled for this video, but hear me out. If a man doesn't feel ownership in the land, in his family, in his tribe or village, he will not be inspired to accept responsibility for that thing. For instance, if I was starting a business and I wanted someone to be an A player for me, someone to be high up in the business, to be a great leader, to really help the business flourish, what would I do? I would give them a ownership role. I would give them a share of the company, right? It's the same thing in society. If you want participants, really good citizens, if you want men to overcome their lower nature and rise to truly masculine and beautiful men and leaders, you need to give them ownership, right?
You notice that there's lots of buzzwords coming in here, talking about things like their lower nature. What's the lower nature that this man is talking about here? Men acting like assholes. cheating on their wives, stealing, shit like that. And what he's basically saying here is like, when you don't feel like you own anything, then you don't want to participate in society. And that's actually true. I do agree with this part. The way that you get people to participate is by giving them ownership. What I don't agree with is why this specifically has to be men. I mean, aren't women allowed to own stuff as well? Aren't women allowed to run businesses? Aren't they allowed to have marriages and have children? Aren't they allowed to participate in society? I mean, are you saying that women shouldn't work? See, I get mixed messages from these manosphere type guys, right? On the one hand, they want men to run everything. On the other hand, they don't want men to be responsible for anything. They want men to be able to go out and have all the sex they want with all the women they want with zero consequences. And they also don't want women to be able to have abortions, or they don't want women to be able to have more than one partner. Well, how are you supposed to have sex with lots of women if women aren't allowed to have sex with lots of men? See how it doesn't work like that? Like, they shame women for doing the exact same shit they want to do. That's the other thing. Then they're also, mostly these guys are anti-abortion. So do you want men to go out and have tons and tons of sex and then have to have tons and tons of children? But they also, since they don't support abortion, but they also don't think that men should have to pay child support at all. They don't want men to be responsible for any children that come from their philandering. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it so that you can bang every woman you want without any consequence, but not have any responsibility for any of the children. I want to really see what he has to say here about that, because what he's saying is that, oh, well, we'll be responsible if we get to own things. So does that mean you get to own the children? You get to own the women? Like, let's see what his take exactly is here.
They're going to say, fuck it. So the main impulse within most men is towards freedom. We don't want to be tied down to all of these obligations and responsibilities to our village, to the nation, to our job, to our family. Like, we just want to wander freely, right? A lot of men do. And
you notice that's exactly what I just said, by the way. So any of you manosphere types who may find this video and are telling me to fuck off in the comments, please take note that he just repeated the exact same thing that I just said. He just, in so many words, said the exact same thing that I said, right? Because this manosphere shit is not that hard to figure out. But okay, it's true, yeah, young men, I would say, don't want to be tied down. Young men want to wander. Young men want to stick their dicks in everything that moves. It's no coincidence that a lot of this manosphere shit has to do with young men. They don't talk about the problems or the issues that older men face. For example, not being able to get a job because of age discrimination, or that your skills are out of date, or something like that. They don't talk about shit like that ever, because, once again, manosphere shit is not about actually helping men. It's about making money. But let's continue.
Society and cultures in the ancient world coped with this will towards freedom within men by offering them ownership, by offering them authority. And this ownership is what created citizens. And this is really important. This is what my last video is about. Bear with me if you're feeling triggered. Citizenship is when you own a long-term stake within a...
Yeah, but the ancient world didn't offer this to men. That's not true. No, you didn't have, like, an average person in the ancient world didn't own anything. The sovereign, the king, owned everything. And if you were a citizen in, say, ancient Greece, like Athens or something, you could not be a citizen unless you owned land. Back in the cradle of democracy or whatever, there was no equality. Women were not considered citizens. It was only land-owning males. They were the only people who got to vote. They were the only people who got to actually have any ownership in their society here. You know, the way he's framing this just right off the bat is antithetical to American democracy.
A larger project, right? So let's say you're in a village, okay? And you own a piece of land in that village. And your kids are probably going to inherit that piece of land. And on top of that, you feel like you have great ownership of your family. You're more of the patriarch of your family. Therefore, how are you going to treat your family and how are you going to treat the land? A lot of modern people will be like, oh, he's going to abuse them and all these things. It's like, no, that's the exception to the rule. The main rule would be you would try to see that whole thing flourish. A father generally wants to see the best for their kids. A father who owns the land is going to pass it down generations, wants to see the best of that land, is probably going to build it up in some way. And on top...
I mean, that's logically what you would say, but that's not what happens. In real life, when you have someone who's in control of everything, and everybody else is in control of nothing, the guy who's in control of everything just does shit in order to increase his own power and wealth. And that's what you would see through these sort of patriarchal societies. That's why, for example, women and girls were treated like property, given away in prearranged marriages and stuff like that. Those things were all about linking families together so that they would increase their wealth and their power. It's not about freedom at all. See, he's talking about freedom, but he means freedom only for the man. Not for anyone else, not for women, not for his children, not even for his sons, because his sons aren't in charge of anything. They're not the ones that own shit. They have to wait for dad to die or whatever before they actually get to own anything. No, and you would think that, okay, well, he wants to make decisions, whatever, in order to grow his land or whatnot, right? Well, what if he doesn't want to do that? What if he's an idiot? What if he squanders it? What if he makes bad business deals that everybody's telling him not to do, and then he does it anyway? What if he wants to go out and just blow it all on, booze and women and gambling? I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples of that all throughout history, of rich and powerful men just blowing their fortunes on bad decisions and vices. Nobody else gets a say, according to this guy. It's like it's only the men who get to own everything are the men who get to make the decision, and they'll make the right decision. We can trust them. It's not a far reach to then say, well, trust your president. He knows better. Trust your patriarchal president. He knows better. Trust the king. He knows better. In real life, it's not like that at all. In real life, kings and presidents and even your father, they're just normal, ordinary people. And half the time, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about or what the fuck they're doing. And if you trust them with your well-being, then you have just as much danger of shit going wrong as anything else. It's bullshit that these guys like to tell each other so that they can feel like they're being robbed or something. Like they're somehow victims. They're somehow victims because they don't get to be in charge of everything. Such bullshit, but let's move on.
Top of that, you are going to want the best for your community. You're going to go and participate in governance. You're going to try to be a good citizen to your neighbors. You're going to build community and build relationships because it's meaningful to you. Because you have
It's meaningful to you because you get to be in charge. That's what he's talking about. It's meaningful to you because you get to manipulate things so that you get to run away with all the money, which is exactly what happens in the kinds of societies he's talking about. The kinds of societies where people who are the wrong race or gender don't own anything, and the small class above who own everything get to make all the decisions. Yeah, they often become involved in the government because that's their position. A good example of this is Saudi Arabia, for example. The royal family has 17,000 princes or whatever, and they all get to be ministers, and they all get to be directors of this department or that department or whatever, keeping it all within the family, while the average person in Saudi Arabia gets jack shit. Are they making society better for everyone? No, they're not. They're making society better for themselves and keeping the people who don't own anything down at the bottom. And that's what happens in feudal societies. That's what this guy is describing. He's describing a feudal society and trying to claim that it's better for us if we live like our ancestors did 600 years ago.
a long-term stake in the whole, right? When you take away the man's role at the head of the family, or you take away the man's role in terms of private land ownership, right? You take away his sense of having a long-term stake in something. Therefore, his nurturing, he doesn't feel.
When did we take away the ability for people to own land? Did I miss something? Did it become illegal to own land? I mean, no. There's no rule that says if you're a man, you're not allowed to own land, right? So where is this coming from exactly? I mean, anybody can go out and buy land in this country, right? I mean, I'm assuming that he's mad because we don't give people land anymore? Is that what he's trying to say? Is he trying to say that my tax dollars should go so that other people can own land? And I don't know what, build their fucking monarchist utopias on it or some shit? Where women don't have any rights? Is that what I'm hearing here? I don't get that. But is that a thing within the manosphere now, that they're all pissed off because they're not landowners? Let's rewind it just a few seconds.
For his nurturing, he doesn't feel inspired to take responsibility for it because it has less meaning for him, okay? Now, I'm not trying to advocate for, maybe outdated and roles of masculinity, I'm just trying to paint a picture of human nature for people out there, is that when people feel like they have ownership in something, they're going to take responsibility in that thing because it has meaning for them. And let's talk about this politically and geopolitically in terms of democracy versus monarchy. Man, we're going heretical in this video, aren't we? Drop a like.
Here we go, folks. So everything he's been saying up until this point has been just hinting about how he likes monarchy, but now we're going to actually do it. So let's see what the guy has to say. Let's not dismiss him right offhand. Maybe he might have something really good to say, and maybe I'll be convinced to stop voting and to make Donald Trump a king, right?
If you like this kind of content. So the Middle Ages saw a lot of monarchies, kingdoms, and aristocracies, right? And there's been a massive wave of propaganda in the past 100 years from liberal democracy saying that the Middle Ages were all dark and kings were like these conniving, greedy, fat fools who were just in it for themselves. And this is not true.
No, that's true. Kings, by their very definition, are in it for themselves. If you're the king of something, that means you own everything. That means everybody serves you. And you are under no obligation to serve your people insofar that you can keep them from revolting. And this is something we saw over and over and over and over again, all throughout not just the Middle Ages, but just ancient history in general, where you'd have one king who was great, and then another king who was a piece of shit and then had to be assassinated. The other thing about kings is that they fight over stuff. So you know how we have like a peaceful transition of power most of the time, right? With the exception of 2020. But most of the time we have a peaceful transition of power and all that other stuff. Like that would never happen in a kingdom. Power would usually transition after somebody got assassinated, or like a king would take over and then he'd just murder everybody who said anything bad about him, stuff like that. Because it really was about serving the interest of the sovereign and not the interests of the people. All the king had to really do was just make sure his people weren't absolutely starving, so that way they wouldn't rise up and kill him. And anything beyond that, usually he would get away with. And that's the pattern that you would see all throughout history. So I don't see how it's a mischaracterization to say kings were despots. I mean, by their very definition, a ruler whose word is absolute is a tyrant, is a despot. Even if he's a benevolent tyrant, that's what he is. That's what the word despot means. Somebody like the leader of North Korea, for example, or Vladimir Putin, someone where he can just murder you and you have no rights whatsoever. In lots of instances in the Middle Ages, the actual citizens were considered property of the king. Not like there's children or anything, but actual property. Like, for example, the Jews were considered property of the king in England. Stuff like that. What this guy's saying is just delusional. It's like, no, they fucking were. They were despots. All of them were fucking despots. All of them were tyrants. Even the nice ones.
You can go see Thinking West, a YouTuber's video on this, but the monarchies of the past, in general, tended to be okay, if not good. Of course, there was bad kings and bad ones, just like there's bad men.
I mean, they're bad by their very definition. The very idea that one person gets to do whatever the fuck they want, no matter what, every single time, and everybody else doesn't get shit. And not only that, but they don't even have the right to actually try to improve their lives, I think is morally just defunct. I don't think that's a healthy thing for any society. And really, history bears that out. The amount of injustice done to people under societies like that. Even we have societies like that even today. North Korea, Russia, fucking Saudi Arabia. They behead people in Saudi Arabia. Seriously, you can get beheaded in Saudi Arabia for like witchcraft and shit like that. That's what's going on in the countries where we don't have liberal egalitarian democracy. So I don't think I'm going to be convinced that democracy is bad, but we're only halfway through. So far, not convinced.
Men, okay? But in that, the patriarch, the monarch, the king, he feels ownership for his entire kingdom, meaning that he is thinking generations ahead, ahead because he wants his kingdom to thrive. He's not going to overtax the peasants because he wants them to be more productive, to have better lives, so they multiply and increase the will to power of the entire kingdom. You see,
that's bullshit. The only reason why kings would not overtax their peasants is because they want to stop the peasants from rising up. And more often than not, the king would overtax their peasants in many different ways, and they would push it as far as they could before somebody would try to depose him. And usually the people that would depose him would be other nobles. So no. It has really nothing to do with trying to make your country better for everyone else, and has everything to do with personally enriching the king and the king's family. You know, I would like to tell you a story about bagels. You know how bagels came around? Well, the actual legend of how bagels came around was that the king of whatever country bagels were invented in put a tax on baked goods. And so some people said, hey, we can make rolls by boiling them, and that way they got around the tax. Why do I like that example? Because it's an example of the kinds of ridiculous taxes that you would see in the past, where the sovereigns of such nations would not take anyone's actual well-being into account, and they would just do whatever the hell they could in order to exploit people in order to make money. Another example is the Stamp Act. This was one of the taxes that actually the founding fathers of the United States used as a rallying cry. And what it was that the British Crown decided that all official papers had to have a stamp on it. And in order to get the stamp, you had to pay all kinds of crazy money. And if you pissed off the guy that had the fucking stamp, he wouldn't stamp your papers, and so your papers wouldn't be official, and you'd be screwed. And that's just another example of how kings and despots use petty laws in order to keep people down. Just stuff like that. I mean, history is rife with these types of examples of unjust, unfair taxes and the things that people did to get around them and stuff like that. It had nothing to do with the king trying to make life better for his people. It had nothing to do with him trying to make his country a nicer place to live or to make it more powerful. I mean, it had everything to do with him extending his own personal power over the lives of everybody and raking in all the money that he fucking can, because that's what kings do. This guy's delusional.
The main instinct of life is to increase the feeling of power in life. And this is a very Nietzschean philosophy. And the feeling of
he's even saying it himself, in order to increase his own power. I mean, I like how we're saying the exact same thing, but coming at it from two different angles, and how we're coming to two radically different conclusions. I mean, I just think my conclusion is the correct one, because it is. I just love how it's like, the dude isn't even trying to deny that this is what he's saying. He just thinks that it's better.
Feeling of power has nothing to do with control. It has everything to do with vitality, an increased feeling of life and expansiveness here on Earth, a mastery of open space.
That's not true at all. He just said power has nothing to do with control. No, it has everything to do with control. Power has absolutely everything to do with control, because if you're not controlling other people, then you don't have power over them. Why is there such a big fight from the Christians in this country in order to stop abortion? Why would they care? Just think about this for half a second, okay? Let's use abortion as an example. You're a conservative Christian. You don't believe that it's just that you should be able to get an abortion. So if that's what you really thought, and you weren't concerned about controlling anyone, then it should be enough that you would just not get an abortion in your personal life. That if you father a child and you don't want the child, then too bad, suck it up, you're going to raise the kid, or you're going to give it up for adoption or something like that. Or if you're a woman and you get pregnant and you don't believe in abortion, you would just not get the abortion. End of story. So why do they want to outlaw it for everyone else? Why do they want to stop everyone else from doing this thing that they don't like? Because they want to control them. Because they want to control other people and force their will upon them, because their religion says to do it. And that's what it's really about. There is no such thing as power when you can't control people. It has nothing to do with feeling free, because you're already free to do the things that you want. You already have the freedom in this country to get an abortion or not get an abortion if you want to. You already have the freedom in this country to not get abortions if you don't want to. You already have the freedom in this country to worship however the hell you want to worship. You already have the freedom in this country to date people, whether they're men or women or whatever. The only reason why you would try to force everyone else to conform to your will is because of control. This is 100% bullshit. It has nothing to do with freedom. And if I don't have control, then I don't feel free and I don't have power. Get the fuck out of my face with this bullshit.
And so the king is going to be thinking, a good king is thinking generations ahead. He's trying to, how can my people, be more productive and live happier lives so they multiply and increase the power of the nation, right?
No king ever thought that. Take out the people leaving happier lives part. Plenty of kings have thought about how I can make my country more powerful so that I'm more powerful and I make more money. But leave out the so my people can live happier lives part. No king ever gave a fuck about that. No king that actually, lasted and wasn't assassinated within 6 months or some shit ever fucking thought that.
And he's thinking this way because he wants to pass down this kingdom to his children, who he also feels to be a part of himself, right? Therefore, he has
he wants to pass it down to his children that he believes are his legacy. Because that is the legacy when you're a king. Your legacy is about passing it on to your family. And that's the other reason why we shouldn't have kings. Because kings are more concerned about their own personal fucking legacies than they are the well-being of their countries. And we're even seeing this shit with, Donald Trump, for fuck's sake. Hiring his children, making his children part of his first administration, for example, when they have no fucking business being there. Ivana Trump and all that. He made fucking Jared Kushner the ambassador to the Middle East, and he put him in charge of the Middle East peace process. Did we have peace in the Middle East? No. All right? No, we did not. He failed hard. Right now, there's a fucking war going on there. But did Jared Kushner give a fuck? No, he just took his $2 billion from the Saudis and he ran away. That's what happens when you have someone who uses nepotism and puts his children in charge of shit over the well-being of the nation. It's the exact opposite of what this guy's saying.
All of this meaning to lead well, to lead his family well, to lead his tribe well, to lead his kingdom well. Contrast that with a president. A president is in office for 4 to 8 years, and it's a popularity vote to get him in there. And therefore, he's not thinking generations ahead. He is thinking, how can I gain popularity in the next 4 years so that people will reelect me, right? What's he going to do? He's going to drive the nation like a rental and make decisions that might be good in the short term, but are detrimental in the long term.
Okay, so there have been presidents that do shit like this. For example, Donald Trump. So I can't say he's completely wrong. But it is wrong to say that every president is only there acting so that they can get reelected. That's not true at all. There have been politicians that actually do genuinely seem to want to make the country a better place. For example, Barack Obama. Here's a good reason why I use Obama for this example. Healthcare was a very contentious issue. It has been forever. Obama's signature legislation was the ACA, Affordable Health Care Act. And if he wanted to just do what he could in order to make himself more popular so that he would get reelected, he wouldn't have touched it until his second term, because there is no pleasing everybody. And if you remember, think back to the Obama years. I mean, I know this guy here is probably too young for that, because that was a good 16 years ago at this point or whatnot. But think back to the Obama years, right? People were losing their mind over healthcare. The Republicans were going crazy, spreading misinformation, saying that it was going to be like socialism and all this other bullshit. And the thing they came up with was highly contentious, and a lot of people didn't like it, but it was something. And yeah, Barack Obama did get reelected, but it would have been easier. And he most likely would have won by a larger margin if he didn't touch healthcare at all. See, what this guy's describing, that type of populism, you rarely see it in our actual politicians, right? Because if a politician wanted to actually get reelected, they would do things that people like. For example, universal healthcare is the kind of thing that people want. It's supported by roughly 70% of the population. Everybody wants universal healthcare. And that, when I say 70%, that means both Republicans and Democrats together support the idea of universal healthcare by 70%, but it's something that we never get. And why is that? Because presidents are not beholden so much to these sort of populist ideals. They're more beholden to donors. So this is why Barack Obama comes up with this sort of ridiculous pro-capitalist version of a healthcare plan. It was essentially the same thing as Romney Care, right? Which is the Heritage Foundation's version of universal healthcare. The idea where you have to actually go and buy health insurance and then we give you subsidies or whatever. That's why they came up with that instead of the thing that everybody wanted. So it really, if it was this kind of populism, like this guy says, dominated political decision making, we would have a lot more things that we actually want in the country. But we don't have those things because presidents are not actually making decisions like that. And every once in a while, we do get things like I just said, we actually do get politicians that try to help things. It just gets filtered through this mesh of special interests and lobbyist groups. And then we end up getting the shitty version because of Republicans, conservatives, and corporations. But that is a subject for another video. Long story short, this guy's full of shit. Moving on.
Kind of like if you rent a property versus you own the property. If you own the property, you're going to cultivate the land. You're going to cultivate relationships. You're going to help it blossom, and you're going to think really far into the future, generations ahead. If you rent the land, you're not going to give a fuck. Okay, you're not going to give a shit about making it better. Oh, I'm only going to be here for 4 years. I'm going to drive it like a rental. I'm going to abuse this. I'm going to pump money into the economy. I'm going to exploit the land as much as possible.
It should be noted that what he's describing is exactly what Donald Trump did, by the way. Pump money into the economy. What do you mean by pumping money into the economy? It's by keeping interest rates artificially low, which is something that happened all throughout the Trump years. They kept interest rates low on purpose in order to spurn the economy, which created a bubble in housing and other places like that. And that's part of the reason why after COVID collapsed everything, we had inflation so hard. It should be noted that, I just want to say that, a lot of these policy things that he's criticizing, saying that these are things that presidents do in order to drive the country hard because they don't give a fuck about the long-term thing. A lot of this, what he's describing, are policies put in place by Republican presidents like Donald Trump. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Moving on.
To, gain prestige for myself and maybe short-term gain for the whole, but to the long-term detriment. It's kind of like using pesticides on the soil. It's going to destroy the soil health for short-term gain, right? And so it's really important, I think, for like revolutionary men and for more traditional men who are going their own way out here, is to think about the concept of ownership outside of political lines, outside of party lines. And that's the thing, is like, I'm not trying to subscribe to any dogma. I'm trying to think freely about how to create.
Yes, he is. No, he is subscribing to a dogma. He's subscribing to monarchism. And I just really want to say this again, okay? The shit that he's saying that he doesn't like are the results of conservatives. Things like pumping money into the economy, things like keeping interest rates low, things like cutting taxes for billionaires, stuff like that. The things that he has a problem with are because of conservatives, but his answer is to completely destroy democracy. It's like the most backwards fucking thing I've ever heard in my entire life. The actual real answer to this is laws and regulations. We should have laws and regulations that prevent this kind of thing from happening. We should have actual sensible tax laws that make sense, that help to keep money flowing in the economy. See, you don't want to pump money in the economy, but what you want to do is you want to keep it flowing, right? You want to keep prices low. You want to make borrowing easier. These are things that help the economy that you can do in such ways without having artificially low interest rates, without having tax rates for billionaires be like 1% and shit like that. That's the actual real answer, is smart policy. But he doesn't give a fuck about actual smart policy, because that's the thing about these types of libertarians. Like, that's what this guy is. He's a monarchist libertarian, at least is what it looks like to me. That's the kind of thing about these guys, is that they don't actually know or care about actual policies, because they don't actually give a fuck about the actual government. It's all about virtual signaling for people like this. he doesn't give a fuck about any actual solutions. He's never actually looked at any of the policies that any politician has actually put forward and seen how he can do it better. What guys like this do is that they find the conclusion they want and then work backwards. The conclusion he wants is that he wants men to own everything. He wants people who are not men who own everything to have no rights. He wants women to have no rights. And he wants to be in charge of everything without actually having to do any work. And his conclusion is that, oh, well, we just need a king that distributes all the land to the white men. Moving on.
Create a flourishing humanity, right? So don't put me in any of your boxes out here. But what I am saying is that the more that man feels ownership in this life, ownership in his spiritual path, ownership of his family, ownership of his community,
300?
ownership of his life, the more responsibility he's going to take,
Okay.
the more empowered he's going to become as a man, and the better man he's going to become. Like, it's so contrary to how modern man looks at this concept. We're like, oh, power corrupts, right? It's bullshit. We need ownership in order to feel inspired to overcome ourselves, to live for something larger. And the more...
But in real life, the men who own things are corrupt. So this idea that, power corrupts, well, I personally like to use another axiom that I actually comes from the Dune books. It's not that absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's that absolute power attracts the corruptible. It seems to me that that's actually the truth. It's the people who gain absolute power are the ones who are corruptible. And it doesn't mean that having absolute power corrupts you specifically, but that you're more likely to get a dictator, for example, who will abuse it. Because those are the kinds of people that try to attain that kind of power. And that's what we see in everyday life. That's just how it is. We see CEOs of companies trying to do things like Elon Musk, for example, using his money and power to unfairly influence elections. Doing things like taking $40 billion and buying the largest social media site on the internet, which was Twitter, and then doing things like kicking off all of the liberal journalists, getting rid of all of the safety checks and things like that, so that you can't do anything if people want to harass you on there anymore. They don't give a fuck, right? Letting all the racists back in. Doing things like getting rid of all the checks for misinformation and stuff like that. And then spreading and spending millions and millions of dollars in order to use this platform and to get his chosen candidate elected as president. He was like doing shit like fooling people into signing his petitions and stuff and saying that, oh, we're going to give away $1 million a day. And the whole thing turned out to be a scam or whatever. It's like, no, these were people that were chosen ahead of time, whatever. We're not actually giving people $1 million a day. Stuff like that. He was doing shit like that. Shit that normal, ordinary people who don't have billions and billions of dollars would never be able to fucking do. That's what happens when you have absolute fucking power. Okay? It's the exact opposite of what this guy is saying. It's like, no, if you have absolute power, you're going to try to help people. No, you won't. That's not what fucking happens. History does not bear this out at all. This guy is delusional. This is all made up bullshit so that he can justify taking power away from people and giving it to himself. That's really what this is.
That feminism rises to like put man in his place. And the more that the world makes it harder and harder to own land, and the more that the world alienates us from shared social bonds and feeling like we have a stake in the future of our village and our tribe and our nation, we're just going to go our own way. And like a lot of men are...
See, I like how he threw feminism in there. Like, you might have missed that, but he just said feminism was one of those things keeping men down so that they don't feel like they own anything. Well, what would feminism be trying to restrict you from owning, if not owning the woman in the relationship? Why would you throw feminism in there as something that, oh, we don't own it? Like, what? What are you pissed off that feminism is stopping you from owning? I mean, I'm assuming it means owning the woman in your relationship, owning your wife, owning your daughter, treating them like property, trading them like cattle, taking your daughter and using her as a tool in order to enhance your own personal wealth by marrying her off to some guy that she's never met, shit like that. Owning your wife, forcing her to do shit that you don't want to, that she doesn't want to do, right? And giving her very little rights, and including the right to actually leave you if she doesn't like it anymore. That's another thing that these fucking, like, insane fundamentalist right-wing assholes want to do. They want to get rid of divorce. Or if they want to make it so that if the woman divorces the man, then she doesn't get jack shit. She doesn't get anything. She's just left with the clothes on her back, and the man doesn't have to pay child support, stuff like that. They call that divorce rape. The idea that a woman would be entitled to actually own some of the property that she and the man own together. They call that divorce rape. What would that result in? That would result in less divorce, because it would be women who can't afford to leave because they have no way of supporting themselves, because they chose to not have careers so that they could stay home and take care of the kids and shit. And then they find out that their husband is like a raging psychopath lunatic who wants to control every fucking aspect of their life. But then they can't leave. They can't leave because they'll end up homeless. That's what this guy is talking about when he says feminism is taking away man's ownership. See how all this shit works? See how you can... The pipeline from misogyny goes straight into fascism. This guy started, his channel is like, Wisdom Warriors, and his entire channel is all about manosphere shit and men's ideas and all this other stuff. And now he's talking about taking away democracy because men need to own things. I don't think I'm going to learn anything else here, so I think I'm just going to stop, unless he has some kind of huge epiphany or something, some kind of poignant shit that he's going to come up with in the next minute and a half. I think I'm pretty much done here, right? But we really need to, let's just turn this motherfucker off, right? Get the fuck out of here. But we need to, as people on the left, if you're a content creator, even if you're just somebody who opposes shit like this, we need to start fighting back, actually debating people like this and exposing them for what they are, posting them on fucking social media and stuff like that. Right? Because we need to reach out to young men and show them, what do we have to offer? Because everything in this fucking video that I just showed you, and I just want to say this one more time because I've said it 4 times already, all of this shit that he complained about men not owning things, about men not having power, not being able to, whatever, not making enough money, whatever, all of that shit are policies that come from conservatives. Conservatives giving corporations too much power. Conservatives cutting taxes for super rich people and raising them on poor people, raising them on men. Taking away worker protections, things like that, so you don't actually own anything, so you don't fucking own your house or whatever. Taking away protections for labor so that you can get fired at a moment's notice. So your boss gets away with fucking murder and you end up getting exploited, so you don't get paid for the work you do for him, shit like that. This is all the result of conservative policies. What this guy is mad at are conservative policies. And this, I think, is what we need to, as people on the left, as progressives. I wouldn't even consider myself a leftist per se, but I want policies that the progressives want. What I want overlaps with what typically is known as progressive in the United States. And I think this is where would be a really good line of attack. It's no, we can give you these things. We can give you protections. We can lower prices and put in controls and stop price gouging. We can make it so that it's more affordable for you to live and easier for you to find a job and harder for you to get fired or laid off for dumb shit reasons. This is what we got to start talking to, because it looks to me that young men out there are desperate for this kind of thing. And they're starting to turn to lunatics like this guy, like Andrew Tate, like fucking Mike Cernovich, and all kinds of other right-wing yahoos or whatever, because they think those are the only people who actually care about them. Anyway, folks, that's all I got. Stay cool, stay safe, fight the power, all that shit. And I will talk to you all next time.
Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.